Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melanie and I run my own small business called Melagurumi, where I specialize in making and selling crochet plushies. It's been almost 3 full years since I started Melagurumi, and it's been quite the journey to say the least. I started year 1 going the online route by making an Etsy store and listing my plushies through there. And then heading into year 2, I just had so much inventory in my apartment at the time that I decided to expand into in-person events just to see what it would be like. And when I was reflecting back on the past 3 years, I realized that the last market I did in June actually marked the 10th event that I've ever vended at, which I think is a pretty cool milestone to hit. I started off with smaller one-day pop-up events and even evolved to doing multi-day weekend-long conventions, and with each event I gained so much valuable insight and experience that has really allowed me to really constantly change and improve how I run my business. So I thought it would be a really fun video idea to share with all of you 10 things I learned after vending at 10 different events. That was definitely a mouthful. I brainstormed so many different ways I could say that, but that was just what I settled on. But anyways, grab a seat, grab a drink, grab a project, and let's dive into it. Lesson number 1, finding the right events to vend at. So when I decided to start looking at events I could vend at, I literally had no idea where to start. I had the business, I had the inventory, but I had no clue where to find events that I would be a good fit for. So I went on Google and searched local vendor groups in my area and in my state in general. And there's a lot of these groups, specifically on Facebook, where a lot of people provide vendor tips in general, but a lot of these people also discuss the different events they vended at, how successful or unsuccessful they were, and even which events to stay away from. These local groups are a great starting point to find out what kind of events are happening around your area and identify if there's any you would be a good fit for. I would also recommend just searching for any events happening in your area, and you can identify specific events that you'd be interested from there. But please make sure you do your research. There's a lot of scammers out there that specifically target vendors. They'll advertise fake events and sometimes even legitimate events, but when it comes time to pay the vendor fee, they provide an email that ends up being a scam. So triple check that all the organizer information checks out, and if you're ever unsure, you can always ask the organizers directly to verify their information. The main takeaway for this one that I want to emphasize is please make sure you do your research to avoid falling victim to scams and wasting your time at an unsuccessful event. Number 2, understanding your target audience. With any products you're selling, you want to have a good idea of who your target audience and customers are. With my crochet plushies specifically, I've discovered that my target audience is a wide range from little kids that don't seem to have enough stuffed animals, to teens and young adults that can spot their favorite characters, to adults that want to gift these plushies to their kids or other people. So with that, I've been able to tailor my product selection based on who my demographic will be. This tip goes hand in hand with number 1, because if you're able to identify who your target audience is, you can then find events that draw your target audience in. There's nothing better than positive interactions with customers that come to your booth and see things that they're interested in, and customers are a great way to get direct feedback on your product selection and what's working or not. Number 3, inventory management. So I'm guilty of not updating my current inventory in real time. I have the tendency to just make a whole bunch of items and then months later I'll pull everything out and then count inventory that way. But that is not the most efficient use of time at all. So it's very important to have the most up-to-date inventory count so you can see how much is readily available and how much you'll have to stock up in the future. I personally just use a spreadsheet where I list the name, the quantity, the price I want to sell at, and then the total amount in dollars, so I'm aware of what that number looks like. Now that I've been deep in prep mode and making as much inventory as I can for my upcoming convention, I've been trying to do a better job at updating my inventory list as soon as I finish an item. Number 4, don't be afraid to experiment with your booth setup or display. I've vended at 10 different events now, and my display has been different every single time. My setup is heavily dependent on the inventory I have available, so as a result, I have to play around with how I want everything displayed because things are always being placed in a different spot. The whole goal of your display is to draw customers in, so I found that having multi-layer shelving and placing items at different eye levels can really draw those customers in. Don't be afraid to experiment and try something new. If your setup doesn't work out the first time, change it up and see what it's like the next time. There are so many unique ways people are displaying their products now, so if you're looking for inspiration, I would recommend seeing what other similar business owners are doing and put your own spin to it as well. But don't copy. Number 5, staying organized and keeping track of everything. So this one also goes hand in hand with the inventory management part, but I can't emphasize enough how essential it is to stay organized as a business owner. You want to make sure you're keeping track of all business related expenses like materials for your products, display, shelving, and supplies, vendor fees for events. For everything that you spend for your business, have some kind of method to keep track of all of that. And then on the other side of that, you also want to make sure you're keeping track of all the sales you make. Your life will be so much easier if you just stay on top of this throughout the year, so you can have it readily available come tax season, versus digging through months and months of transactions and sales to make sure you have all the numbers correct. Again, I personally just use a spreadsheet that has all the raw data and information in it, so it's all in one place, but you can also look into third-party software that can do all of that for you as well. Number 6, preparing for the weather, both for indoor and outdoor events. If there's anything I've learned from being a vendor, it's that the weather definitely plays a part in your overall mood at an event. 8 out of 10 of the events I've done have been outside at all different times of the year. I've vended at events in the dead of winter where it was super cold to peak summer where I was sweating profusely and so many others in between where I kept going from hot to cold to hot to cold. So with all that in mind, it's really important to prepare yourself and your vendor space for the weather. This can come in the form of having multiple layers if it's too cold, having fans blowing when it's super hot, having a tent or a canopy to block out the sun, and having the minimum amount of tent weights required to weigh down your tent if it becomes windy. On the other hand, for the 2 indoor events I've done, a tent really wasn't required for those events, but now you have to deal with the room either being too hot or too cold. At my last convention last year, I literally wore a jacket because the convention hall was so cold. So all that to say, weather can be very unpredictable, but definitely try to prepare yourself as best as you can in order to be the most comfortable you can be as a vendor. Number 7, learning how to interact with both customers and vendors. So for me, I'm borderline introverted and extroverted. I'd say up until I graduated high school, I was pretty introverted, and then college kind of grew me out of my shell and allowed me to have more opportunities to be more extroverted. I also was a server at a Malaysian restaurant for a couple years while in school, and I think that customer service experience specifically allowed me to really practice and figure out how to kind of put up that customer service front and kind of foster that relationship as like a seller to a buyer. I know talking to people, especially strangers, can be pretty scary. I definitely get anxious and get kind of awkward when interacting with people sometimes, but it's really important to just continue having those types of conversations so you can learn to be more comfortable having them. You're already a step in the right direction as a business owner, putting yourself out there, so just continue to take advantage of all those opportunities where you can interact with customers so you can just practice speaking and interacting with them. It's also equally important to build positive relationships with fellow vendors as well. Your vendor neighbors can keep an eye on your booth if you have to go to the bathroom or step away for a little bit, and fellow vendors can be great resources for you to learn other business tips and even find out about upcoming events that they'll be participating in. So this lesson is something that I've actively learned with each event that I've done. Again, it might be a little intimidating and scary at first, but with more practice, you'll eventually become more comfortable and confident in these interactions. Number 8. Have multiple payment options available. So it's 2024 now, and there are so many different ways someone can pay for an item. It can be a little intimidating to explore different options that you're not already familiar with. However, I think it's important to have a good range of different payment methods available for your customers to make it as accessible to the general public as possible. For me, I have a few different ways customers can pay by. I accept PayPal, Venmo, Zelle, and Cash App as the payment apps. And then I have a Square terminal that accepts credit and debit card both through tapping and swiping. I think those are generally the most accepted payment methods. There could be other ones that I just haven't looked into, but I found that by accepting those specific payment methods, I don't have any problems with making the actual transaction. At minimum, I would ensure that I would be able to at least accept cash in one of the payment apps. When I first started vending at these in-person events, I didn't have a card reader at the time, so most of my transactions were either made through cash, PayPal, or Venmo. And that usually sufficed at the time, but I think having a card reader would have helped a lot more. You don't want to lose out on potential sales that you could be earning just because you don't accept a certain payment method. Number 9, know your worth. Okay, so this one was a really hard lesson I've had to learn, especially throughout the past year. When I first started vending and selling my products at in-person events, I wasn't super confident in my products and I wasn't sure if people would even be interested in buying them. And as a result of that, I was severely undervaluing and underpricing my products. Over time, with the customer feedback and seeing how much people were willing to spend on my products, I started getting the confidence to really kind of take a look at my business and say, wow, I actually make good quality products. And with that, I started becoming more comfortable with pricing my items for what I think they're worth based on the amount of time and effort I put into making that product versus how much I think someone would be willing to spend on that specific item. So with that change in mindset, I've come to realize that by putting that value on myself and my business, I'm attracting the right audience that does see that value and supports me for me. I've had several instances where people have complained about my pricing, but on the flip side of that, I've had so many interactions where people have straight up told me that I am undervaluing myself and that my prices should be higher. So my main takeaway for this one is don't cut yourself short and undervalue the effort you put into making your products. We as artists and creators are already undervalued because the time and effort it takes to really hone our craft is priceless in my opinion. But if you just set the baseline for what you value yourself at, then the right audience will find you. And lastly, number 10. Be flexible. So this is one I have to constantly remind myself with at every single event I do, because no matter how much you plan in your head how things are gonna go, things will never go as expected. Whether the nice warm day for your outdoor market ends up becoming super rainy, or your booth placement isn't exactly what you hoped for, or the amount of foot traffic was a lot more or less than what you were expecting, it's really important to be able to roll with the punches and take the situation at face value and do what you can with what you have. That's just with life in general, you know? So that wraps up 10 lessons I learned from being a vendor at 10 different events. Let me know what you thought of these tips, if you've been able to enact some of these with your own business, or if there's any that surprised you. After doing these for a couple years, these are all things that if I knew straight off the bat coming into the vending world, I would have definitely felt a lot more prepared. But with experience, you're always learning as you're going, and these 10 lessons have really shaped how I run my business. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you'd be interested in more of these types of videos, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.